Welcome to another episode of Closed. This is Lee Bergstein, and I'm really excited to have with us today the co-CEO and principal of GFP Real Estate, Brian Steinwurtzel. He's one of New York City's most active, GFP is one of New York City's most active owners and operators of commercial property. Although, Brian, I'm not going to disinclude you from that activity as well.
Thank you.
You're obviously playing an integral role. And there's a lot that we could talk about, but today we want to talk about office to residential conversions, and specifically the project that Brian's team is at the forefront of at 25 Water Street. But first, Brian, thanks so much for joining us on the Monday after July 4th. I know it's a busy email inbox day, so we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
So I guess, 30,000 foot view, how did, tell us a little bit about the project at 25 Water and kind of how it came to pass, and give us, like the 2-minute elevator procedural history, if you would.
Sure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. So 25 Water was known as 4 New York Plaza. It's a building in the financial district, which GFP had been active in for the last decade. We had actually just completed a large 1 million square foot office renovation project a block away. So we're very familiar with this asset. And when it came to market, we immediately reached out to our partner, Nathan Berman at Metro Loft. And the idea was to take advantage of some of the legislation that had been passed in the 1990s and early 2000s to convert office buildings to residential downtown. The neighborhood had approximately 30,000 people already living in it, and a lot of the buildings were on their way to being converted. Because of the financial district, a lot of the office buildings were trading at serious discounts to what they had been trading at before the pandemic. And we knew that we could acquire the building at a basis which made it financially viable to convert. The big question was, how do you actually take a building that has approximately 50,000 rentable square feet, floor plans, and turn them into efficient residential plans? And together with Metro Loft's help, we carved 2 light wells into the building. We took that floor area, stacked it on top, and built 10 stories on top of that building. And we're able to actually create a floor plan that is 85% efficient, which even for new build residential is very, very difficult to achieve.
What were kind of like the, I guess, external and internal obstacles that you had to overcome? I think 5 years ago, before the pandemic, talking about converting some of these massive office spaces to residential, people would have been like, "You're crazy." Now it's all the rage, and I feel like one developer is trying to outdo the next.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now, I think 25 Water is the largest office to residential conversion, but that's going to be surpassed very soon. So, what were some of the obstacles at the outset that had to be overcome, both internally and externally?
I think, yeah, some of the biggest obstacles at the time were, the pandemic had sort of set off New York City real estate in a sense that it was difficult to understand where New York was going. We have had confidence in New York City and where its future will be, and decided to lean into that challenging time. But at the same time, financing, raising equity, raising debt, and being able to structure a deal to get enough investors to put in the capital was very difficult, especially in 2022 when interest rates were starting to spike.
Mm-hmm.
And people were wary about where New York City would be. We were able to do that. Second challenge was just the physical nature of the building. Prior to our renovation, it was designed to look like an IBM punch card. So it had very few windows on the first 16 floors of the building.
Yeah.
And so we knew that we actually had to remove almost all of the brick on the building and put in brand new window wall all around it. So a lot of obstacles on a financing basis, a lot of obstacles on a physical basis. But the team that we put onto 25 Water had just finished another project, but it just finished actually building David Geffen Hall for Lincoln Center, and that was even more complicated. Basically, to create a top 3 world-class facility in a landmark building in a time period that was less than 3 years. So the team that we have at GFP, we knew we could actually accomplish those physical constraints, physical issues. And fortunately, the market believes in GFP and all the projects we've done previously. So we were able to overcome those financing hurdles. But going for us, we also knew that the residential market was extremely strong, that people were moving back into New York City, that rents were starting to recover from their pre-COVID levels, and that other landlords that had built buildings with significant amenities, even if the assets were enormous, like this one, that residents flocked to them, and that they were outperforming the rest of the market. So when we decided to move forward, we knew that as long as we created an environment where tenants would have access to a significant number of amenities, and 25 Water has over 100,000 square feet of amenities in the building, that we would be able to draw tenants to this asset.
I mean, I think from what I understand, one of the overlays between residential and office that makes it attractive both to potential office tenants and residential tenants are amenities, right? That's kind of the mid 2020s. If you want to take significant office space or you want to move into a luxury apartment, you need to compete at the amenity level. Was that something that was a major consideration when you were trying to figure out what to buy, what was a good candidate for conversion, and what were some of the other kind of big picture selling points about 25 Water that said this is a great candidate for us to do this?
Yeah, I think, well, so look, I mean, you can look at it from the investor perspective, you can look at it from the tenant perspective, and we can talk about looking at it from like the city's perspective or society's perspective.
Right.
From a financial perspective, it's what we talked about before. We were able to buy it for a discounted price because of what was going on in the office market. We had a team that could execute a construction project within budget, and more importantly, on time. And then from a tenant perspective, we could deliver all of these amenities. So, having an indoor pool and an outdoor pool, having basketball court, 2 pickleball courts, having bowling alleys and pool tables and ping pong tables, co-working on site, so that this work from home phenomenon, you'd be able to continue it, even after the pandemic. And things like having, you may be sacrificing by having a smaller apartment in New York City, but then being able to have these rooms where you could rent out for private dining, or to have, a large event that were exclusively available to tenants in the building. So, creating that environment, we knew that we would satisfy what the tenants were looking for, in the market. And then on a societal perspective, I think that during this period of construction, we spent a lot of time with the city officials, with state officials, and we're trying to understand, how do we actually create affordable housing that makes sense for New York City. And what emerged from that is the 467M program, which we were heavily involved in, and where we have really what I like to refer to as like workforce housing in this building. So it's people that are, working in New York City, that make, enough money where in probably any other municipality in the country they could live, but because New York City is so expensive, they're not able to. But because of this program, they are, and they're also able to have access to all the same amenities that the market rate tenants do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good segue to my next question, which is I'm sure this is 2 weeks after the Democratic primary for mayor. Right now, you'd have to say that Zohran Mamdani is probably the overwhelming favorite to become the next mayor of New York City. A lot can happen between now and November, and a lot of people are trying to make things happen between now and November. But right now, I'm guessing your assumption is he's going to be the next mayor until otherwise. And obviously, speaking to the affordable housing component, one of his main campaign slogans was "freeze the rent," which I think people misunderstand, but that refers to rent stabilized units and not increasing the increase in the stabilized rent for those units. So, is that something that's going to kind of factor into the analysis moving forward for this property and other properties, or are we kind of cart before the horse? We have to see, one, if he wins, and two, if he actually does what he says he's going to do.
I think it's probably the latter. Look, I think everyone in New York City wants affordable housing. This is not subject to one party or one person. It's something that we all actively talk about and are trying to figure out how to actually create it. The biggest challenge is that it's expensive to create housing in New York City. The statewide, the average cost of a housing unit in New York State is almost $700,000. Right. So to create a housing unit, someone has to pay $700,000 for it to be built. And the developers are willing to do it if they can make more profit in a different way in order to subsidize that, or if there's some sort of a tax abatement, or if there's some other methodology where it makes economic sense. And so what we like to talk about with politicians is we want to create programs where everyone will want to opt into it, because the program either works or it doesn't work. And so the successful programs like 467M are ones where almost every developer that's converting a building for 467M will opt into the program. And as long as we have elected officials that are willing to sit with us and listen to our perspective, and we are willing to listen to theirs, I think we'll come up with that legislation. The issues that at least I've seen in my career are when the dialogue does not exist, or when there's not trust between both sides of the table. And then what we have here is gridlock and very few programs that actually make sense, and then very few housing units actually get built.
Right. I think the interesting thing about 25 Water and other similar projects is you have this intersection between market, affordable, office, residential. It's all the things that, like, quite frankly, on our podcast, we talk about every episode in some fashion. Like, all of those vectors are coming together to kind of create one unique opportunity. And I would imagine that whoever's the next mayor of New York is going to look at that and see that that's really good for the city. And it sounds like that's kind of the at least what your hope is.
Hopefully, it's everyone's
Yeah,
desire. I do think these dialogues are extremely important. Just because you want something doesn't mean it will happen, right? We have to figure out the actual means and methods. And we live in a capitalistic society, and that's been one of the reasons why New York City is so successful. So we need to figure out a way that it makes financial sense, because you can design the most beautiful project, but if you can't finance it, if you can't raise equity and debt, or government subsidies to do it, then it will not get built. And people that I talk to that don't understand real estate, construction, real estate financing, usually are missing those components. But when I do talk to them about it, they understand it. And if we have that understanding, I think we'll come up with programs that will build this housing that we all.
yeah. What, if anything, did you find the community was most excited about when you kind of whether talking to local politicians or talking to potential renters, when they heard about this project? What was the feedback you got? And then, to the extent that you're willing to talk about it on the flip side, what were some of the concerns?
Well, look, I think affordable housing is the most talked about thing in almost every conversation we have. So I think that is helpful that we're able to create so much affordable housing in a single asset. Um, Secondarily, I think, and one reason why conversions are really fantastic is because they're some of the most environmentally friendly policy and projects that you can undertake. Because look, if we're building a new building, we have to take the old building and literally throw it into a landfill.
Right.
Right? Converting a building, we are maintaining almost all of the infrastructure and structure to the building, and we're saving on so much energy, pollution, materials that would go into it. So that's usually a secondary thing and something that we believe very strongly in. And then, the other side of it is, well, how does it affect the existing people in the neighborhood? What will it do to the neighborhood? How much traffic will it drive? And the truth is, residential buildings actually have a lot less traffic than commercial buildings. Like, commercial office buildings are much more dense. They have a lot more people that are coming. When they do come to the building, or when they go to lunch, or when they leave the building, office buildings have a lot more traffic in a very finite, small period of time. So it tends to cause congestion. Whereas residential buildings have a lot less people per square foot. They are coming spread out usually throughout the day. And so the environmental footprint, and the quality of life issues that you see with residential, are often less than commercial. And then I guess a final one is just, what are we going to do with the retail? Are we going to be able to bring in, stores or, companies that will somehow add value to what's already there, and fill in gaps that are missing in terms of services that are needed? And we try to listen really hard to those. But, being a retailer in New York City is a very difficult thing. So there is some element of, we may want a certain type of use, but they may not be able to survive financially. But we try to listen and find the right groups that will help the community.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who used to work downtown, I don't anymore. I would come in on the weekends occasionally for work. This was, I don't know, 2015, 2016, and they were kind of dead. There was nobody around. And I mean, look, for one thing, there's just been more rental buildings that have gone up there. You do see that um, many of the office to resi projects are in that neighborhood. And I think there's helping the awakening of that neighborhood, not just as a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday place to be, but as a 7 days a week, full New York City experience. I think that's an exciting component, at least for me, as somebody who loves the downtown area and has felt in the past when I worked there that there was something missing from the residential side. So I think
I,
that's great.
I completely agree with you. My wife and I lived down in the financial district in 2004 and 2005. So we experienced sort of when that was starting to, re-arise, if you will. We lived in the first new built residential building after 9/11, and there was not a lot of people that lived down there, and it did feel very empty on the weekends. But today it's extremely vibrant. I am down in the financial district 3 out of 5 days during the week, and just because we're so proud of 25 Water, I am very often on a Saturday or Sunday showing the building off to friends, investors, or others that are looking to learn more about these projects. And it's great. It's a mixed use neighborhood. It's a 24-hour mixed use neighborhood, and some of the most successful neighborhoods in New York City, have that 24-hour mixed use, sense. And I think the financial district is going to be, one of the best, if not the best, in the future.
So what do you think is kind of the future for office to residential? Are there a finite number of buildings in the state that this can be done, and we're gonna hit a brick wall at some point in the short to medium term, or are you kind of bullish on this transformation as the combination of the the difficulty that Class B and C office buildings have currently, and I know that's going to change in the foreseeable future. Hybrid work, the need for affordable and market rate housing, is it a combination that just is going to lead to a boom in this area over the next 10, 20 years?
Yeah, I think that what we have seen over the last 3 years, I think will continue, at least in the foreseeable future. There's a lot of commercial office buildings that need significant reinvestment, and depending on their location, reinvesting in them as office buildings may not be, a very good financial investment. Whereas we know that we have a significant amount of demand for residential housing, and so as long as the developer, execute a good business plan, and by hiring great consultants, we have a fantastic team with Setra Ruddy and Compass Development, and as long as you hire, really quality partners to do this work with, the building will be full of residents. And then the question will come down to, elected officials and what kind of programs do they put into place? How easy is it, or how difficult is it to, get permits to actually do the work that will lead to more or less housing being created.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think the office market has recovered and continues to recover, and the landlords and owners that have created very high quality buildings are leasing at record prices right now. So, these opportunities come about when a building needs to have a significant amount of capital invested in it, and then the owner has to decide, well, what is the better investment?
Yeah, I mean, it's at its core, it's a math problem, right? Do the economics support the conversion? And then I guess the legislation, both the current legislation and new legislation, has to kind of support the math problem, not make the math more difficult. That's an overly crude way of stating it, but I think that's what I'm hearing.
Correct. And then if you want to have affordable housing, it needs to be subsidized or paid for in some way. And if you force the developer to pay for all of it, then what normally happens is the project doesn't go forward. And so that's what we're seeing. We know that there's demand for hundreds of thousands of housing units, and yet not every site is being built on, yet not every office building is being converted. And so that just shows that there's something preventing that from happening, even though we know we need it. And so what hopefully elected officials will do is they will remove all these barriers to these projects being done, and that housing will,
Are there other markets that GFP is looking at to pursue these types of transformations, or right now are you solely focused on kind of the ad market?
It's a good question. It's one that often gets asked to us, and it's one that we often ask, inside GFP. But we are really New York City, and I would say Jersey City focused. We know this area very well. We're embedded here. Our roots are here. we believe in this community in this area, and so we're just focused on this region.
You want people to be able to ferry back and forth between your office and to resi conversions and experience all of them in 25 minutes if they can.
And so far so good. Our legacy office portfolio, which our family has owned for 3 generations, really 4 generations now, is done very well. And we're the largest landlord to small and medium sized tenants in New York City. And I do hope that a lot of our tenants live in a lot of our buildings. That would be a wonderful ecosystem to help create for New York City.
So if people want to find out more about 25 Water or just about GFP, where should they go? What can they do to learn more about the building and the projects you have?
Yeah, so I mean, our websites and Instagram are the best things to do. But if you look up SOMA, SOMA, then that is the best way to find SOMA, the building, which is the address is 25 Water, but the name is SOMA. And I think please come down. And our tours are almost all booked, so make sure you make an appointment in advance. But I think you'll be impressed by it, and it's really a beautiful asset.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see it. And Brian, can't wait to have you back on after the next project, and good luck with this one.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For more on all things real estate and the law, subscribe to this and our other podcasts. Follow Bergstein, Flynn, Knowlton, and Polina on social media. Subscribe to our newsletter and go to bfklawoffice.com. That's bfklawoffice.com to learn more.